Ecclesia.
Jack Shewmaker joined Wal-Mart in 1970 and has served the company in many capacities, including President and Chief Operating Officer. An advocate of higher education, Jack brought a compelling message to the Ecclesia College Assembly on September 9, 2010.
Good morning. Okay, you hear me through this? What a beautiful day. Do you agree? Every day is beautiful, especially today if you're a farmer, like I am in one of my hats that I turn around. I live on a cattle ranch, and we hadn't had much rain, so to see this much rain coming down makes it even more beautiful for me. But when you're my age, in fact, I'm 72, and I've been married 52 years, the same lady, which would have had nothing in my career without her partnership and support. Got 3 married children and 10 grandchildren. I guess you realize when you're getting older, when my son is also retired. And I just had a granddaughter graduate from a university. And I've got 6 grandchildren that are studying in college like yourselves. We were talking amongst us this morning in Orrin's office, and I would argue that one of my credos for life is you be a lifelong student. And I do that. I probably read more books than most students do. I study more different things than most have an opportunity to do. In the last 2 years, I've been in nearly 50 countries. I told Martin next March I'm going to New Guinea, where I've not been before. But before then, I'll be very close to there in Australia and a few other places. Have friends all around the world. But what I would hope to do is to answer your questions more than talk about things I want to talk about, because there may be things that you would like to ask, and although I may not be able to answer it, you'll get my best shot, and you'll get what I consider the truth. One of the things that a lot of people don't really realize is you don't make a successful university or college or company by doing dishonest or inappropriate things. Now, sometimes they get off track, and you can mention several companies that have had that happen. But if you don't trust the head leader or the people that are leading you in the company, the odds are stacked against you that you will become really successful. And Wal-Mart is, of course. Orrin was referencing that during the time I worked there, actively, our average rate of annual sales increase was 37%. That's pretty good. Our average rate of annual profit increase was 38%. And I never got paid a big salary. Nor did Claude Harris, for my knowledge of that, nor did John Tate, actually, although John probably started at a higher rate than we did because of his education and background. But the fact of the matter is that most of the money that I made, and I made a lot of money, was because I owned part of the company. I bought the stock, and during the time that I actively worked there, the stock split 9 times, 2 for 1. I never made a 7-figure salary, never in my life, while I worked at Wal-Mart. And I probably wouldn't have worked at Wal-Mart had it not been for a really profound incident in my life. And I'll tell you the story, then I'll stop and ask what questions you would want to ask me. But I can tell stories about Wal-Mart and the relationships and things that melded it into the company it is today for ours. So you get tired of it, you let me know, and we'll do something else. I was working in retailing and had for a number of years, traveling throughout the Midwest, calling on stores, supervising stores. And in fact, I was working for Kroger, which is now the #2 largest retailer in the United States. At the time, they were much, much bigger than Wal-Mart or any of the other affiliates. And in working for them, I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of ideas. And the problem I had with them at the time was nobody would talk to me about those ideas. It wasn't that they disagreed with my ideas that bothered me. It was the fact that they wouldn't enter into a rational discussion, at least at my level, with me about what I thought would make the company better or what we could do differently. So one day, I quit. I mean, no notice. You're not supposed to do this, by the way, but no notice, I quit. Gave them my keys. I went home. I had wife, 3 little babies at the time, no money in the bank, a rental house, car payments, and no way of getting any other income. The wife said, "You did what?" And I said, "Well, never mind." I said, "I'm pretty well known in the industry. Somebody will call me rather quickly with an opportunity, and we'll be off and gone." 3.5 days later, no one had called yet about any kind of a job. And she said, "You know, the kids might like to eat." And I said, "Well, yeah." And so I started traveling all over the United States. And in those travels, I'd remembered opening a Kroger store where Sam Walton had come to the store for the opening, and we talked about what he was doing with then maybe a dozen, 15 at the most, Wal-Mart stores. And so we talked about it. So I thought maybe one of the places I'd check out would be Wal-Mart, Bentonville, Arkansas. Well, I grew up in a much smaller town in Missouri, about 100 miles from here, 100 and some miles from here. And so small town America, this part of the world, wasn't scary to me like it was a lot of retailers, but it was also a place that I would like to live, you know, sooner rather than later. So I came to Bentonville, Arkansas, which was a town of, I can't remember, but 3,000 or 4,000 people. And I interviewed with them, and they offered me a job. And I said, "Well, thank you. I'll think about it," and I left. And I didn't talk to Sam Walton that day because he was out traveling the stores or somewhere. So I get to my sister's house, who was a teacher up in Missouri, and stopped there for the night, not having listed her name or her phone number or contact anywhere on my resume or application. And that night I got a phone call. And the person said, "Is this Jack Shewmaker?" And I said, "Yes, it is." He said, "This is Sam Walton." And I said, "Oh, hello, sir." I was least polite. And he said, "Well, I heard you were down and talked to our people, and they thought you had a lot of good ideas." Well, he said the right thing because, as you already know, that was important to me to have someone listen to my ideas. And he said, they thought we should get together. And he said, "I'd like to meet you and interview you." And then I said what's got to be the dumbest thing that I ever said in my life, maybe one of the dumbest things on record for anyone, but I did do it. And it's easier now for me to admit to it, was for a long while. And that is, I said, "I just don't see a lot of merit in driving all the way back to Arkansas." Now, Sam was already a millionaire. Keep in mind that I was broke, didn't have any money, and he was obviously on the way to great success, and I wasn't going to drive 100 miles back to Arkansas. That's pretty dumb. But it's one thing to be a little bit stupid in the learning process, and it's another thing to be a jerk. And because he said to me after I said, "I don't see a whole lot of merit in driving back to Arkansas," he said, "Will you meet me halfway?" Think about that, because that's part of the message I wanted to deliver to you today. There he was, successful. There I was, a nobody, but with some good ideas and maybe some potential. And I wasn't willing to drive back to the office here to talk to him. And yet his ego or his pride was not offended by that, to the point that he was willing to meet me halfway. Or as I later learned to describe it, a little bit more than halfway. Now, I wish you would think about that in all that you do. Because, you know, we have a lot of conflicts, a lot of disagreements still in our world, and I'm sure even you do at times, or certainly I do. And so many people say that they will meet and talk about it, but their idea of halfway comes to where they have described it or defined it, and they stop. And the other person has their idea of halfway, and they stop, and they never quite get together. Sam Walton had a tremendous quality about him, characteristic. He understood that enigma, and he would make it a point to figure out what the other person's idea of halfway was. And that's where he meant to meet you. And just like with me, we met at a Howard Johnson's restaurant up on I-44 in Missouri, and we sat and talked for 6 hours, during which time we drank numerous cups of coffee. I think coffee then was 20 cents a cup. And I must have drunk at least 15 cups. And no wonder Howard Johnson's went out of business later on, you know, if they did that with very many people like myself. But Sam had those tremendous qualities of understanding the other person's point of view. And even for years, I saw him meet other people halfway. A lot of these stories not known throughout the organization or throughout, because Sam wouldn't tell them about himself. So I was kind of the voice of Wal-Mart for a number of years, telling these stories about Sam that were absolutely true. One of the things that made Wal-Mart great was Sam was a Christian, Claude was a Christian, John Tate was a Christian, I'm a Christian. We had other religions that we respected that worked in our group, but we all had a real belief in God. And we all prayed to our Creator. And we all believed that it was important to be honest, sincere, understanding, and truthful. So whenever I was talking about the company and I said I'd answer your questions, transparency was a big, big deal at Wal-Mart. And for the 4 years I was chief financial officer and the 6 or 7 years I was president, I would tell our associates wherever I went, you can ask me any question that you want about Wal-Mart, the structure, our program, our plan, our intentions to do this or that, the accounting things that are going on within the company. And if it's permitted by law for me to answer your question, you'll get my best answer. And if I can't answer it, I'll find someone that can, as long as it's legal. That was the only qualification. And I've had some really tough questions on that basis asked over the years, some of which I could answer, some of which I could not. People said, you know, Sam Walton built an empire like that, that he had to be of an overt purpose, that he had to want to dominate the world or whatever. I'll tell you something about him. He's been gone since April 1992. I remember clearly the day that his son called me that he had died. I was in Canada at the time. I never knew Sam Walton to tell a lie. Now, if he's like me, I suspect that he told at least a half-truth sometime or other, but I didn't know about it. I never observed it. And so the same with me, I tried to always be truthful and never knowingly told a lie during all that time that I was there. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't tell a lie earlier in my life. I think all of us have sinned in that way one time or another. But my first experience of manufacturing a big lie, my father was a deacon in the Baptist church, and I told this lie, and it was so obviously a lie that after getting reprimanded and spanked and tanned for a few minutes. Having told that lie, I decided that was not a good program, and he explained to me in great detail why that was not a good thing to do. I like to fish. My father liked to fish. At the early age of 5 years old, I started going with him and grown men on fishing trips. So he comes home this one day and tells my mom and myself that he's going fishing with his fishing buddies, but no women, no kids allowed on this trip. And that hurt my feelings really badly. So at that time, the optimum fishing rod was a telescopic steel fly rod. And maybe some of you have seen some of those antiques, but there was no fiberglass. There was none of the modern things that we have today. It was just tubes of steel that slid inside one another. So I decided that the way that I'd keep my father from going on this trip at the age of 5 was to hide his telescopic steel rod. We had an old basement that was just a dug-out earthen basement in our house. So I proceeded to hide it in the basement. And after my father had looked for it for minutes and I think hours even, he came to me and said, Jackie, that's what they called me when I was that age, and he said, Jackie, have you seen my fishing rod? Not really, Dad, which was the first lie, because I knew exactly where it was. But then I really compounded the problem because I said, I think the rats ate it. That's when he realized that the credibility of my story was pretty suspect. And of course, I got in trouble about it, as I should have. But I want to open your eyes to the fact that we become a culture, maybe not here, but in most of the places you'll go, of half-truths. It starts out, and lies. It starts out sometimes with good intentions, sometimes not. But you'll even see television commercials. I remember one recently where the daughter comes through and tells her dad in another room that the refrigerator is totally gone and needs to be replaced. And it wasn't. And as she comes by, her mom hands her a $20 bill. That's on TV. And we wonder why we have corruption in our politics or our businesses when in fact we actually blatantly advertise the fact that there is some reward or benefit to saying the wrong thing. Easily done. You see someone and they look like they're sick. And you say, oh, you look great today. Well, when I told you, Don Peterson, that you look great today, I meant it, because you did. And Don Peters. And so, and I've told you a few times that you didn't look so good as well whenever you visited with me on the ranch or somewhere, as you know. I urge you to consider the fact that when you finish your career or you pursue your career or further education or missionary work or whatever it is that you choose to do, that when you finish that, the only thing that really will matter to you a great deal is that the people that you've helped, especially your family, and your character and what you stand for, personally. Whether or not you have a reputation of being honest, helpful, religious, straightforward, and I'm not talking about just your relationship with God, I'm talking about your relationship here on this earth as well. And your credibility, whether or not you're known for telling the truth or not, will be amongst the most important. If you have drifted into a pattern of telling people something they want to hear, or covering up something that they should know, like, an easy one is people that come to work and get there late and they say, oh, but I ran into traffic. Truth of the matter may be that they got up too late, or they got started too late, or they weren't prepared. And yet it's become very customary even for people to say, oh, well, I had this that I couldn't control happen to me. Stop when you're prone to do that, and we all are. Stop and think about it. Why should I do that? Why not just say, actually, it'll be better for you in the long run if you understand the dynamics of how it all works, when you just say, hey, I got up too late. Because then it puts some obligation on you to correct it more quickly. Whereas if you just dismiss it, automatically dismiss it, you relieve yourself of the responsibility for telling the truth in the future. Big lies, and you see many of them today, happen throughout business, happen throughout politics, even religion. Big lies, in my judgment, start off being little lies in the beginning. Why didn't you get home last night when you were supposed to? It's an easy lie to make an excuse for yourself or for others. Stop. Think about it when you do it. Reconsider your position on it. Because when you're faced with some really big decisions sometime, if you've had a pattern of telling half-truths or innuendos or small lies, you're going to find out that it's terribly difficult to make a decision that could have consequences on yourself, adverse consequences, and on others, when it would be really easy to tell a lie and conceal it. And instead, I urge you to face it directly and honestly and openly. And then, having done that throughout your life, and if you have a career, anything similar to what I've had, being proud of the fact that even though there are people that found you unlikable at the time, perhaps a bit radical at the time, that you did what was right and told the truth to the best of your ability. Don's built many a building for me. And I've told him this before. One of the things I most appreciated about him was if he said they were going to be there, you could almost mark it on the wall, they were going to be there, if he had to drag everybody there with him. And if he wasn't there for some peculiar reason, he'd tell you what it was and why and what had happened. That builds a great strength between you and the people that you visit with, especially in a marriage. Especially in a marriage. It's not an automatic that you stay married 52 years, especially when you travel as much as I do, especially when you got to be the president of Wal-Mart, and I was offered millions of dollars to tell a lie or to take advantage of the rest of the associates in the company to my benefit, or to have some immoral relationship in your travels. It's not easy to say no to those things. Any of you think that it is, haven't walked that mile with me. It's not easy to say, yes, but if that will diminish my character and it will adversely affect or potentially adversely affect many others some point later in my life. Think about that whenever you have that opportunity to tell that half-truth. And think about your reputation and profile going forward. Well, I went on too long. You wanted to ask me questions? I'll be as transparent as I know how to be. Yes? Well, there's times you have to pray a lot, frankly. But I also would say to you that there are some positions that you can take that I would recommend. One of the easiest ones that I know about is to understand the process. You know, you've got a supervisor that's in charge, and he's got a supervisor that's in charge. When there is a disagreement between them, it's terribly easy for someone in business to take the position of the supervisor in charge all the time. Sam discovered early on that the better position is to always take the side of the underdog until they're proven wrong. Think about it for a little while. Who's the most exposed? Who's likely to have the weaker story even because of their lack of experience in that area? So it was a real simple process, which I must admit in the beginning that I found difficult. But then when you saw what he was doing and why he was doing it, he would take the position of the person that was the lesser authority, which I would have to say probably wasn't right half the time even, but didn't matter. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that you were the fair arbitrator of all instances. And if it was 50-50, you took the side of the underdog. And you ask why Walmart, for all those years, didn't have unions? They didn't need one with bosses that took that point of view, because they were always protecting the individuals, and we were working for their betterment, not just our own. Sam didn't take a lot of salary, of course, and I didn't either. We didn't need to back then, because we knew that people that were treated right were going to buoy us to the top regardless of it. And so one of the easier things is to take that position. The other thing is to understand this story I told you, first of all, about meeting other people halfway and doing that very carefully. We had a policy and a position that is so often abused and misused in politics. I was told a story yesterday that just appalled me about someone in the state of Arkansas that's in a position of high authority, and the language that they used in admonishing somebody that they'd done something that they didn't agree with. By that I mean vulgarity, or taking the name of the Lord God in vain. Why? Why do that? Why say those absurd words? It may be popular with a few people that's around you, but I guarantee you it's not popular with most. You know, we see it in politics on television where somebody off camera says something to somebody else. Why do that? So Walmart's position is we never, now I'm not going to tell you that they never use vulgarity, because I know that they have and they do, but I can tell you that I didn't. I can tell you that Sam Walton didn't. And if you think about it a long while, there's a good reason why. It's offensive. It's belittling. It's demeaning. And anytime you usurp your role of authority to demean or belittle another person, you're headed for trouble. If they ever catch you lying to them, will they believe you when things are really difficult? See, a lot of Sam's management techniques and the things we used weren't well understood. We went out to the stores. There were hardly any associates that we hadn't met or know during that period of time. So, and we were honest with them and open with them. I remember one time going to the first warehouse that we ever opened outside of Northwest Arkansas. It was in White County, Searcy, Arkansas. And they were having a lot of disagreements in the warehouse and all. So I go in there and the management's saying, okay, be nice, because I've got a reputation for being very direct and honest. And I found that to be a problem at times for some people, but for me, it was what I preferred to do and found most beneficial in the long run. So I go into Searcy, Arkansas in this warehouse, and I'd spoken at Harding University at a graduation or meeting. I go into the warehouse and they say, well, what do you think of our warehouse and of us? And I looked them straight in the eye. This is a few hundred people, and I said, you've absolutely got the worst attitude in your business of anywhere I've ever been. The other management people around me, I think John Tate was even there for that one. Other people around me went, well, you can't do this, you can't say it. You're going to make them all mad. But you know what? I made some of them mad, I'm sure. But most of them said, why? Tell us what you see, what it's about. And I just being honest. I said, maybe we've caused it. Probably we did. But I want you to ask me the question, how it looked and how it was working. You got the worst attitude of anywhere I've ever been. They figured out how to fix it. They went from the worst to the best. That's the kind of honesty things that it does with people. You can't tell them that they're good when they're not good. You can't tell them that they deserve an A when they don't deserve an A. You help them more by being direct and honest in your relationship, and heaven help you, hope with God, and with your relationship with each other, and with your family and with others. It's probably the most important thing you can do. And whenever necessary, take the side of the other person. The thing about it is, if you're the boss, you can always change that position. And that's what most of them don't realize. You can always go to saying, you know, well, I've heard your story now, and you're wrong. And I've done that a few times. More than a few, I guess. But honesty prevails in all of that. The other thing is, I remember one of our buyers committing to a large order verbally. In the business, you knew that if it wasn't in writing, you really didn't have an order. But in this salesman's mind, he had an order verbally. So he went out and contracted for thousands of fixtures, the display stands in the stores, to be made in order that they'd be ready whenever the merchandise was ready to ship to the store. Well, the buyer figured out that they really hadn't made the right decision, and so they canceled the order, which left the company with this huge backlog of fixtures with nowhere to go, nothing to do with it, thousands and thousands of dollars. So they'd come to me even, and I'd said, well, you know, it sounds like you didn't hold up your end of the deal either, and they hadn't. But it wasn't black and white. And so Sam came to me and said, give them all of their money back. And we did. They were probably more wrong than they were right, but we gave them all of their money back. Why was that the right thing? Well, because the vendor believed that they were right and we were wrong, and nothing we could do at that point would convince them otherwise. And so it was important to convince them that we were fair. And next, the word went out throughout the industry that Wal-Mart was going to treat you fairly, no matter what. Now, recently they've had some issues where they used their power to over-control the vendors. Not a good idea. Never use your power to make your point of view right. If it doesn't stand on its own, it doesn't stand. Yesterday I was in St. Louis. I have an airplane that we keep up in Bentonville, and my son is a pilot. He's a retired F-16 pilot from the Air Force, and went to Air Force Academy and fought in some of the wars and was overseas and all. Actually flew during, post 9/11, he was still in the military and flew. He was the squadron commander that transported the president from Florida to his ranch in West Texas and on up to Omaha. And then he flew. He was on alert. He was operations base commander at Fort Smith. And he was on alert and flew for several days. And a lot of people had no idea the sacrifice they made. He was sleeping on a cot in the command office for like a week and a half. And when he was not in there directing others, he was out flying those missions himself over these towns. And yet, Don knows my son, and he wouldn't tell you that, because he was doing what he thought was the right thing. And I know that sounds terribly oversimplified, but the general in charge of Desert Storm gives a talk in which he says, when all else fails and nothing seemed to work in explaining who you are or what you're doing or why you're doing it, and there's no books that tell you what you should do or shouldn't do the right thing. And I believe that if you practiced a life of honesty and integrity, that when you get in that situation, whether it's in a major conflict or in a business decision with a major oil company or with a retail company or whatever, that if you've read your Bible and you've practiced these things and you've treated people fairly, when it gets down to that really difficult moment, if you stop and think, you'll know what the right thing is. And you'll do the right thing if you believe as I do. Now, there'll be a lot of days when you'll say, I'm not sure whether I can do the right thing. I remember when I first went to Wal-Mart, I had a state patrolman that did the right thing, and he had every reason to do something different. My first job was to travel down to South Fayetteville, where the first Fayetteville Wal-Mart store existed. It's no longer there. It was Store 6. My job was in charge of remodeling and expanding the store. And so every day I'd get up from home up here, and I'd drive down to Fayetteville. Well, you either went 102 down or 112 down, or you went down through Springdale through all the stoplights. Well, I was going down through Springdale through all the stoplights, and I got down to the south side there where that underpass goes under the train, and I was kicking it in gear because there was an 18-wheeler in front of me, and I got to where if I didn't pass him before we got to that underpass, the road went back to 2-lane, and I knew I would be really late for work. So I stepped on the accelerator, and I went around, and as I came out from the other side, State Patrolman already had his light on and stopped me and pulled me over to the side, and he comes up to the car, and he was real nice about it. Came up and asked to see my driver's license. I handed it to him. He said, "Are you Jack Shewmaker?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You were going a little fast, weren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir, probably was." He said, "Well, I clocked you doing 83 in a 40-mile-an-hour zone." I don't know if back then, it maybe wasn't as absolute as it is today. That's probably in jail for a few days. And he said, he went, "Is this your car?" And I said, "Yes." He went and looked back and looked at the back end of the car. And then he came up and asked to see my driver's license again. And he said, "Where do you live?" And I told him Bentonville, Arkansas. He said, "Where are you working?" I said, "I'm going down to Fayetteville to remodel a Wal-Mart store." He said, "Let me see, Mr. Shewmaker, if I've got this right. You're doing 83 in a 40-mile-an-hour zone. You've got expired Indiana license plates on the back of your car, and you've got an Ohio driver's license, and you live in Bentonville, Arkansas." I said, "Well, I didn't know all that, but if you say so, I'm sure you're right." And he said, "Mr. Shewmaker, you seem like a reasonably nice guy. I'm going to let you go, but not because I'm just being nice to you." He said, "If I took you in, I'd have to spend all day explaining this to the judge, and I just don't have that much time." He said, "You go home and get it straightened out." So fortunately, I went home and got it straightened out. What made that man do that? He made a personal assessment of who I was as an individual and whether or not I was deserving of that kind of consideration. You make those choices every day with the friends that you're with, the classes you attend, the stores you shop, the driving that you do. You make choices every day that, as small as they may seem to you at this time, as unimportant as they may seem to you at this time, shape your life. Do the right thing. And you'll be proud that you did. Many a time. later on. Earlier this year, I spent a month in Africa. I got to see and do a lot of things that I'd always wanted to do. For example, I hiked in to see the mountain gorillas at 8,000 feet. And I saw a lot of people there that don't have the same opportunities that you have here. Wish they did. So do I. One of the things that I do is I'm involved with Students in Free Enterprise. Some of you may have heard it. It's an organization that is international, and they practice integrity and honesty in the practice of business and educating others so that they can participate in the economic environment that we all live in, you know. I mean, if you want to eat, most places in the world, you better figure out how to make enough money to eat or to barter enough to eat. And that's true on a worldwide basis. And people can give you something for a couple of days, but that's just a couple of days. And you better learn how to take care of yourself, as I did many years ago, and as I'm sure you are too. But one time I was on Pan Am flight number 1. Pan Am is the airline that went out of business some years ago, and they had that Lockerbie crash that's so notorious. But I was on Pan Am flight 1 with my wife, going from San Francisco to Tokyo, Japan. And I was sitting there, and the person behind me was telling this lady of Hindu faith, because I could tell by her attire and everything, he was telling her that in order to be successful in business or profession in the United States of America, that you had to be willing to lie, cheat, and steal. Oh, it made me mad, because you know what I've tried to explain what I believe. So I'm ready to jump up out of my seat and slug the guy. And I don't do that type of thing, but I was ready in this case to take him on right there in the aisle of that plane. And of course, my wife has got better judgment than me most of the time. And she said, sit down, relax, it's okay. And so I listened to the man talk. And my conclusions were, and this is where you can be wrong also, is prejudging the situation or people before you know all the facts. My conclusions included that this person had to be from a large liberal university on the East Coast or West Coast. I mean, forgive me for any of you that have those connections, but that's where my mind went, and I was sure of it. And so I was just dying to ask him where he was from and why he believed that way. Well, I listened to him a while longer. He had been in business. He had inherited a family business on Long Island, New York, and had gone bankrupt and gone out of business. But I was wrong. He wasn't from the East Coast or West Coast. He was from a university very near us here today, and a history professor. And he was teaching students that in order to be successful in business in America, you have to be willing to lie, cheat, and steal, which goes against everything that I believe. So I decided I had to get involved in this Students in Free Enterprise and counter that by trying to teach what I believe to be the better path and the most important path that you can take. I'm sure I was speaking at a college in Michigan recently, and it's probably as conservative a university and college as you'll find anywhere in America. And wonderful students. One of the students came up to me after I gave a speech somewhat like I'm giving today and said to me, you know, I'm confused. He said, I'm going into political science, I'm going into politics. And my professors even here at this very Christian, very conservative school have told me there may be times in my life that in order to do the better good for the greater people that I may have to bend the truth or tell the mistruth. I said, really? They believe that? You believe that? I said, I don't. I really don't. I think if in getting to that more quickly, you find it advantageous to tell an untruth or a lie, there will be a day later on when you will regret it severely. Don't do it. And I've had a lot of communications with this individual since that time. Next month, I'm going to Australia, and on my way there, I'm going to give a speech in Los Angeles, California, Anaheim actually, to several thousand students from 50 countries all over the world. And I'll tell them the same thing that I'm telling you here today. And I just hope that I'm not asking that you take me as the absolute truth on it, that you believe me just because of who I am or what I say. I'm asking you to do what I did. Think about it. Whenever you start to tell somebody a half-truth, even though you think you're helping them, stop. Think about it. Is that the right thing? And what will that lead to later on whenever I have to tell the truth somewhere else? God bless you. Thank you for listening.